Hi, I'm Chantal Cook from NALP. Joining us on this webinar, where we're talking about setting up your own paralegal practice, is Amanda Hamilton, who is our former CEO and our current patron, Jane Robson, who is our current CEO and was our former Director of Compliance, although Jane does still wear the compliance hat, and Nigel, who looks after our marketing, and myself, who looks after the PR and social media. So we're going to actually, today, what you're going to do is hear from all of those people, so that everybody gets, you get advice from all of us, basically. That's really the idea, is you get advice from all of us. So we're going to do a quick thing, 5 minutes each person, as much help as we can give you in setting up your own paralegal practice. And then what we're going to do is have questions at the end. And as I say, put your questions in the chat if you have them. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Amanda, and then Amanda will hand over to Jane after that, and we'll go from there. So Amanda, over to you.
Thanks very much for the intro, Chantal. Hello, everybody. My job this afternoon, not this evening, is to talk to you about when you're thinking about setting up your own practice, what are the first things you should be thinking about? Well, clearly, one of the things you need to know for your own purposes is whether there's a demand for the kind of work that you want to do. Now, if you're convinced that that is the case, then the next question you've got to ask yourself is, do I start up as a limited company, or do I start up as a sole practitioner? And my advice would be always to start working for yourself as a sole practitioner. Now, there are several reasons for that. First of all, there are cost implications if you incorporate your business. And even though there are some advantages to incorporation, you do need to know whether your business is going to be successful. Otherwise, there's no point in spending money to set up a limited company and instruct accountants and providing company's house accounts and so on and so forth, if the business is not going to prove successful. So my first initial advice would be to think about working for yourself. Now, clearly, when you're working for yourself, there are advantages. I'm not a financial advisor, so you do need to approach an accountant if you require financial advice, more than I can give you from a business person's perspective, which is if you can work from home, save yourself some costs. Clearly, if you are bringing in an income after a year, you have to consider your own tax returns and any tax consequences of your earnings. Having said that, as a sole practitioner, you do perhaps have ways of deducting items from tax, and for that you will need further advice from an accountant. Now, once you've decided there's a demand for the work you do, once you've decided that, yes, I'm doing reasonably well, then it will be the time to consider whether to incorporate or not. Now, again, my advice would be find yourself some accountants and approach them for advice. But there are cost consequences, as I say. There may be corporation tax to pay if there are profits. There are benefits as a director of your own company. You can take dividends from the company up to a certain amount, but that will be taxed too. So there are certain things you need to discuss with an accountant before you go ahead and incorporate. So those are the things that I wanted to suggest to you. The other point, finally, I would put is that if you need to borrow money to set up your own business, in other words, you need equipment, I would suggest that most people these days have laptops or computers of some kind, printers, phones, etc., etc. These are all the things you would need, obviously, to run a business, and therefore you may have them already. But if you do need to borrow money for any reason, then make sure that you've got a proper business plan in place before you approach any bank or building society. And that may incorporate you having to project the amount of income you may earn over the next year, 2 or 3. I'm just warning you about that in case that is something that's on your mind. Now, each bank or building society will have their own requirements, and you need to do your research on that. So, to sum up, first of all, I would suggest if there's a demand for what you do, you start working as a sole practitioner. If after a year or so you're doing reasonably well, I would suggest giving it a year or 2. In fact, it's usually the first 2 years where you know you're quite solid in the business that you're running to think about incorporation. If you do decide to incorporate, get yourself some decent accountants to discuss all the consequences of incorporating your business as a limited company. Now, that's my advice to you. I'm now going to hand over to Jane, because Jane has some very important information to impart when you're thinking about setting up your own business. So thank you for your attention. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Amanda, and that was really informative. As Chantel alluded to, my background is all in compliance and regulations. So whilst some people go, oh no, not that, it is extremely important, and particularly for those who are running their own business as a paralegal. Now, one of the main things that you have to be keenly aware of is that you are not doing anything that could be interpreted as holding out. Now, holding out is where you give the impression that you are a regulated legal services provider, such as a solicitor or a barrister. Now, this can be quite inadvertent sometimes, just because if you continually refer to yourself as a lawyer, for instance, very often people misconstrue the word lawyer, even though it doesn't necessarily mean someone who works in regulated legal services in this country. Elsewhere, such as in America, it does. It's synonymous with being like a solicitor or attorney or something. And so people, because they see it so much on the TV, let's face it, they watch Suits or whatever, and they just think, oh, a lawyer is the same as a solicitor. And it's not in this country. So we do recommend that you make sure you make it abundantly clear on any websites or anything else that you might have that you are a paralegal. The other thing to be aware of is you may form relationships with solicitors and barristers, etc., who are then members of the Law Society or the Bar Standards Board or whatever. You can never claim that you are a member or put on your website that we are members of these organizations on the basis of some relationships you may have with somebody else, because that would be inferring that it's your company that holds those memberships. And so you are claiming to be a member of the Law Society, which is mostly just for solicitors, or a member of the Bar Standards Board, which is for barristers. Similarly for Silex, claiming that you're a member of Silex, if you are not, can be, unless you're specific about the paralegal, can be that they take it that you are a chartered legal executive, which is another regulated activity, or reserved activity. So that brings me on to the reserved activities of being careful of what you are advertising that you are offering and what you do actually offer to your clients, making sure that you do not state, for instance, that you can advocate for your clients in court without defining which courts you are allowed to do that for. You can do so in tribunals, etc., but when you're getting into courts, you don't have the right of audience as a paralegal. You would have to apply for that. Now, some courts may grant such an application, but it would be on a case-by-case basis. So you wouldn't just be given the rights of audience to your local courts for every case that you might be involved in. It would be, you would have to apply for each case that you do. So be very, very careful about that. Similarly, do not make sure you're not doing things like signing any documents or anything like that. If you have a look at the Code of Conduct, NALP's Code of Conduct and Ethics, that will give you a really good idea of how to run your business in a compliant manner and in line with all regulations. So I do really advise you to understand those and look in your members handbook, because that actually breaks down all of the code of conducts and gives you a fuller explanation in the members handbook. All of those can be found on the members portal. The other thing to say, that if you are setting up it as your in your own business, I would highly, highly strongly recommend that you apply for a license to practice from NALP. That gives your clients some additional comfort that you have been vetted and checked by an organisation such as ourselves. To do that, you will also need professional indemnity insurance. And that again gives your clients comfort that if anything goes wrong, they have some form of redress. That, you know, because if it can split you out from the sort of fly-by-nights, as it were, because being a paralegal isn't regulated, you want to show that you are above those who are just kind of setting up and not a member of any organization and don't have a license to practice and what have you. You need to show that you are setting yourself to a higher standard, and that is a really, really good idea and gives your clients so much more comfort and will actually encourage more clients to come to you. So they're my main points for regulation and compliance as a paralegal. So having finished that, I will pass on to Nigel, who will impart his wisdom on marketing.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Yeah, I will see what I can do to help around the marketing piece. I start, unfortunately, with some maths in terms of saying, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve over the next 6 months, a year, 2 years? Because you need to start with some numbers to work out what you need to actually do marketing wise. So what are your financial goals? You know, what do you need to generate in revenue terms to be able to live and to be able to sort of grow the firm going forward from there? What does that actually mean? So if you're targeting, let's say, generating £100,000 in your first year, how many projects, how many clients, how many pieces of work does that actually mean? Then working backwards from there, how many potential clients, how many leads or prospects does that mean? And the more you can actually work out and give yourself a good picture of those numbers, the more you can then say, okay, well, I need to do X amount of marketing. Now, hopefully, you'll get a lot of work that comes from word of mouth, and word of mouth is always the best form of marketing. And particularly in the sort of the paralegal world, I think it's a really important one that can generate a huge amount of work. But putting those measures into place to work is the sort of base of that marketing piece. The second piece then gets rid of the word anyone. I hate the word anyone when it comes to marketing, because you will all have the specialist areas that you work in, and so the people that you want to have as clients will have very specific needs, issues and wants, and really mapping those out and saying, what do my target audience want? How can I help them? Because your marketing messages need to be around how you help, how you make their problems go away, rather than saying, I'm a paralegal. Because to be blunt, nobody cares. What they care about is how you can help them. I saw that look, Jane, as I said, nobody cares. They really do care about how you can help them. So if you're talking about how you can help them resolve a particular problem, then they're far more likely to be engaged with you and want to talk to you about how you can help them. And then also have a think, why should they use you instead of your competition? There's almost certainly lots of people out there that do what you do and are specialists in your particular field, but having to think about why you rather than anyone else. Now, that could be the amount of experience that you've got, that could be a whole bunch of things, but have a think about that as well, because people will ask. The third stage is then to plan. What are you going to do? For your particular audience and your target audience, what are the right marketing channels to use? Now, these days, lots of people want to use social media, but there are thousands literally of social media channels. Which ones, where are your client, where are your target audience likely to be? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it Snapchat? Is it TikTok? What is it? And have a think about it, because you don't want to be investing your time in doing lots of stuff on lots of different channels when it's a waste of your time. So have a think about that. Is it that you're one of the first places you need to make sure you are on is obviously that's the paralegal register. If you haven't checked your NPR listing recently, please go and do that to make sure that it's fully up to date. But what other marketing is there? Is social? Is it PR? Is it email marketing? Is it attending events? Is it networking? Have a think about the best ways that you're going to be able to get in front of your target audience and work out what that plan is going to be. What I would say is have a plan for what you're going to do in the early days when you're first setting up your firm, and also think about how that's going to be impacted as you go forward. Because as you get busier and you bring on more work, you'll have less time for marketing. So you need to have a think about how you can be able to deliver that marketing plan as you get busier. And then the final stage is what I call deliver. The absolute number one in terms of number one thing in marketing is consistency. You need to be making sure that the messages that you want people to see and your brand is going out there on a consistent and regular basis so that people remember you. Because the first time they see you, they may or may not have a need for your services, but you want to make sure that you remember and you're remembered and your brand is at least back of mind. So at the point they do need your services, they'll go, I remember, let me get in touch with this person. And then it starts again, yeah, and it loops around. So you've worked out what your marketing is, you've worked out who you want to talk to, you've done some marketing. Now it's about measuring it. Okay, what has worked, what hasn't? Because if it's not worked, you need to either change the way you do it or change that particular channel and not do that thing anymore. If it has worked, great, do some more of it. Yeah, so it's a sort of cyclical process of measure, focus, plan, and deliver, and then go around again in order to maximize your marketing performance. So I hope that helps. If you've obviously got any questions, please pop them in the chat. I noticed somebody's put a question in there and we'll get to those shortly, but now I'm going to hand over to Chantal, who's going to talk very specifically about PR and social media.
Lovely, thank you, Nigel. Okay, so briefly on social media, as Nigel said, there are lots and lots of channels and you need to work out the ones that are right for you. I don't think it's worth the time and effort trying to do all of them. Really hone in on where you think your audience will be, but also which ones you're going to enjoy doing. So social media isn't a panacea for all your marketing. It's not something where you can just say, oh, great, I've got my social sorted, that's me done. And if you really hate doing social media, then I really would question whether it's the right platform for you. I think with any kind of activity that you do, if there's something that you really hate, then you probably won't do it, which means you may as well just check it off your list and focus on something that you do enjoy doing, because the marketing that you do, whichever marketing it is, the only marketing that has any chance of having an impact for you is the stuff that you actually do, not the stuff you think about doing or that's on the list. It's the stuff you actually do. So when looking at social media, yes, absolutely, as Nigel said, think about where your audience will be. Think about kind of what you enjoy doing. And if nothing else, then maybe ditch all of them if you're not really keen on social media. But I would say think about LinkedIn, because obviously LinkedIn is a professional platform, and I think it's important for you to have a presence on there, and ideally regularly post on there. Regularly could be once a week. It doesn't have to be every single, twice a day or anything like that. Also, when you're thinking about content for social media, whichever platform you're using, then think about it in terms of light and shade. So you want some things which are, maybe important information about stuff in the news or advice that you can offer, or even promotional stuff for you. But think about some light stuff as well. So is there something interesting or fun that you've seen? Is there something just fun that you're doing that shows a little bit about who you are? Because the whole point of all of this is to help people to get to know you. And we remember people better when we feel like we resonate with them. So if you've got something particular about like I keep a number of pet pigs. I talk about my pigs sometimes. And although it's got nothing to do with my business of PR and social media, it gives something a little bit like, oh, she's the woman with the pigs. And people remember that. So think about a little bit of that light and shade. Moving on to PR. PR, basically, to define it for you, is when you get other people, journalists, influencers, bloggers, newspapers, magazines, radio, whatever, talking about you. So they do it on their platform. It's not on your platform, it's on their platform. And you, if you like, go through them in order to reach their audience. That is essentially what PR is. PR can be very powerful because it gets you out to a much wider audience, whereas social media is often about talking to the people who you've kind of already gathered around you. Nothing wrong with that, but you've got to gather them first. PR helps you to gather them. So if you're thinking about developing a PR plan, then the things you want to think about again are, where are your audience and what do they want to know? Always think about the audience. Don't think about what I want to tell them. Think about what they want to know. And if you think about what they want to know, then that is absolutely your first step to getting journalists interested as well, because journalists are the conduit between you and that audience. And you need to persuade the journalist or the influencer or blog or whatever in order to feature you. And what they're looking for is really good content for their audience. And if you can provide them with really good, useful, interesting content for their audience, then they're going to be interested. Don't believe anyone who says to you, oh, journalists are desperate for content. Absolutely not. They have got so much of it, they literally can't cope. But if you can cut through with something that goes, wow, that's really interesting and my audience will love it, bingo, you're great for PR. A couple of places that might help you. You can do your PR yourself, absolutely. But it does help to have professional help because they have the contacts and the knowledge, obviously, of who does what and when and all those kind of things. But if you need some extra help, then I do this myself, but I recommend my own book, which is called PR Demystified, How to Get Free Coverage by Giving Journalists What They Really Need. That's available on Amazon. It's about $5.99 or something. If you put my name on it, it will come up. So that's a good book that talks you through the whole process. Virgin Startup run a lot of webinars and support as well. If you're starting a business, they're a really great place to go. You can also, they do startup loans and things. And then finally, we at NALP offer our members a free 20-minute PR call. So if you're setting up your business and you want to do some PR, then you can book in for a free 20-minute call and kind of pick my brains, basically. So that's the support that's available to you, should you decide to do that. Hopefully you found all of those things interesting. So from Amanda, we've talked about the best way of setting up your business and perhaps starting as a sole practitioner, but also putting a business plan in place if you really think you need to raise some money or something like that. Jane has talked about holding out and basically being compliant. So to make sure that you're not in any way implying that you're anything other than a paralegal. That is absolutely essential. Nigel has talked about marketing in sort of general terms, about absolutely you need to define who your audience is, and he's absolutely right. Your audience isn't everybody. It's something very specific. It could be people who have got family issues or debt collection issues or something like that. You need to, or or landlords looking to evict tenants. Whatever it is, it needs to be quite specific, and then from there work out where that audience is and then you can work out what kind of marketing to do. And then finally, I've covered briefly about creating interesting content on social media and always thinking about what the audience wants should you decide to do some PR. We've got a few minutes left. I know we're overrunning a little bit because we started a little bit late, which, as I say, wasn't my fault, and I apologise for that. But if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat box and we will be able to answer them in the remaining few minutes. So there is one question.
Yeah, I was going to say, Luke put a question in. I think this one might be for Jane. Do you have any guidance, any comments regarding Baxter versus Paul? Am I pronouncing it right, Luke? Which I believe is a case where someone was conducting litigation when they shouldn't have been.
Yeah. This is
Would you,
what I was
sorry to intervene, I beg your pardon, but perhaps I might be in a better position to answer that.
okay,
If that's all right with you. Sorry, I was just going to say, so conducting litigation is a reserved activity. And conducting litigation means that you cannot sign court documents on behalf of your client like an agent, like a solicitor does. You can assist your client going through court processes. You can complete forms for them, but they have to sign those forms, not you as a paralegal on their behalf. So I'm not familiar with the case off the top of my head, but if it's about the conduct of litigation, that's it in a nutshell. And hopefully, Luke, we've answered your question on that, unless there's something more specific you'd like to say about it.
Okay, well, if Luke's got any other questions, do pop them in the chat. And thank you, Amanda, for that. Hopefully that's covered it. I think the key thing here is everything really comes back to holding out and reserved activities. You have to be clear on what holding out means and how to make sure you're not doing it. And you have to be clear on what are reserved activities, in other words, activities that really paralegals cannot perform. Nigel has put a link in the chat box. So in there is a link to the members handbook, and that gives you a lot more information about both of those kinds of things. And in fact, actually, the members handbook, there's also information about PR and social media and marketing and all those sort of things too. So don't do what a lot of us do, which is you kind of get something like that and then chuck it on the side and think, oh, I'll look at that later. It really is worth having a look at that link and sort of taking your time to read through, because there's a lot of really useful information in there.
I was just it's very much about bearing in mind that it's not just that you specifically stating that you conduct litigation, it's implying. Anything that implies or infers can be holding out or conducting litigation. So you've got to be very, very careful of what you put in your client care letters and things like that.
Okay, we just had another question come in from Ada. What limits are there to conveyancing practice?
I'll answer that one if I may. Okay, conveyancing is a regulated service. So that means that you can't actually set yourself up as a conveyancer without being licensed to do so. And you have to be licensed through the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't assist a licensed conveyancer or a solicitor who is a conveyancer. That's perfectly fine. As a paralegal, you can assist those individuals, but to set up in practice as a conveyancer, you need to be licensed, and that license can only be gained through the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. So hopefully that's answered that question.
You're on mute, Chantal.
I am. Thank you. Right, so I can't see any other questions there, except that Luke has put a little update for us saying that case that he referred to, Baxter versus Doble, is very wide and has extended what the court considers to be conducting litigation. So as he suggests, it probably is worth a read if that's something that you want to know more about. So thank you very much, Luke, for bringing that to our attention.
May I just make one final point about the reserved activities, Luke, which you've just sort of jarred my my brain a little bit, that some of the reserved activities that are still currently in place are being eroded. And that case is a prime example where they're expanding what conduct of litigation is and should mean. And also the rights of audience have for many years now been discussed as to whether they should be reviewed, given the difficulties that litigants in person have in court, and how somebody stepping in as a paralegal who's used to advocating can assist the court as well as their clients in such circumstances. But at the moment, it still stands, as Jane referred to earlier, that if you want to, as a paralegal, represent your client in court, you need special permission at the discretion of the court. And I see that time is running very short indeed, so that's where I'll stop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, Luke, no, I haven't read the Lay Rep Act. You need to understand I am not a solicitor. I have not, well, my background is compliance and regulation. So I haven't read every single act. Yeah, so I will have a look at that and come back to you.
Lovely. We have one other question. We've kind of run out of time. So and it's a question of sort of similar question to the conveyancing one, which is the limits within wills and probate. I don't know whether, Amanda, you can literally give us, I don't know, 30 seconds on that, so that, because I know we are running out of time, but if you've got a quick 30 seconds on the limits
Yes.
of paralegal doing wills and probate.
Yes, that is a reserved activity. Some probate activities, i.e. signing and applying for a grant of probate, is still a reserved activity, which needs to be done by a solicitor currently at the moment. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you all so much for joining us today for this webinar. We really appreciate your company here, and also lots of questions today, which is always great. So a little bit of information for you. We have some more webinars coming up. In fact, our next one is on the 29th of June, starting at 12:30. And then after that, we're going to have a little bit of break over the summer, because I think we all need a bit of relaxing, don't we? So we'll have a bit of a break over the summer and then come back again with more webinars in September. But our next one is 29th of June, starting at 12:30. And if you're taking a paralegal qualification, or you're thinking about doing some more qualifications for a paralegal, you are definitely going to want this one, because this is basically going to show you a little bit about how to think like an examiner. In other words, what examiners are looking for, which is always really good information to have if you are doing qualifications. So that's our next webinar, 12:30 on the 29th of June. And then after that, so a little bit of a break, and then we'll be starting again with the more webinars in September. As I always say, if you have a webinar topic that you would like us to cover, please do let us know. You can drop us an email or via our socials and just say there's a topic, I'd like to know more about this, and then we'll do our best to set up a webinar on that topic to give you the information that you need. Another quick reminder, do click that link on for the members handbook. There is lots and lots of really useful information in there, including lots of what we talked about today as well. So if you need a bit of a refresher, the members handbook is the place to go. And finally, I do want to give another plug to the National Paralegal Register. If you're setting up in business, or you're already in business, I cannot stress how important it is to be listed on there. If you think about it, if you're a consumer and you were wanting to find a paralegal to do some work for you, where would you go? Well, the obvious answer is the National Paralegal Register. So unless you already know a paralegal, you're going to look at a register and go, right, how do I find the person that I want that has the expertise that I need? So the National Paralegal Register is definitely well worth registering on. And if you haven't done that already, then please make sure you do. If you're a little bit confused as to how to do that, or you need any help or whatever, again, get in touch and we can point you in the right direction for that. So that's all from us. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 29th of June at around about 12:30 to find out what those examiners are looking for.